Welcome to Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association, brought to you by Leadership Books. I'm Kenneth Kinney, but friends call me Shark. And like you, I'm a professional speaker and I love listening to Speakernomics. It's the professional speaker show that will help you thrive and grow a speaking business so you too can change the world one keynote session, workshop, and speech at a time. And on this episode, it's going to be a good one. We're going to speak with Mark Scharenbroich. Mark is an Emmy Award winner, a Hall of Fame speaker, a CSP, an author, and he's been cited as one of the top 30 motivational speakers by global gurus. Mark, welcome to Speakernomics. How are you today?
The Shark. I'm doing great. Thanks, man.
Fantastic. Now to all my speaking friends, what are you doing to make meaningful connections on the road of life? Let's say you stumble upon people and hear them saying a simple statement to others that turns into a connection, a story, a keynote, and a very successful speaking business. Can you take an unforgettable metaphor and turn it into an unforgettable career? And after all, how will you get there? By plane, train, car, or even a nice bike? And before we jump in, make sure to go to Speakernomics.com. That's where you can find the tips, insights, and knowledge to help you become a better speaker, build a better business, and get paid to speak. Mark, let's dive in. I have 1,000 questions to ask you, but let's start with a few questions around nice bike. You took
that was a nice lead-in, by the way. Well played there, Shark, man.
I drink a couple of Red Bulls and script a little bit of it in practice. But so the few questions I have around nice bike, you basically took a compliment people were saying to each other in a metaphor and turned it into a story that, and I know you already had a storied career before that in the youth market, but with this one, that became such a trademark level of success. How do you go about connecting a story like Nice Bike effectively to audiences who may not know you or necessarily be in a familiar industry or even who don't own a Harley Davidson motorcycle? I mean, most of us obviously know the brand, but when you're trying to go through life in a beige rented Ford Taurus, how do you connect that with all the audiences so that they really understand it?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's my message isn't for Harley riders. In fact, I've never been on a Harley. I haven't even sat on one on the showroom floor. I'm more of a pontoon boat kind of guy. But as you mentioned, I've been in the youth market for years. I'd spoken at 3,500 high schools. I was a high school assembly speaker, which is the greatest training ground in the world for speakers. It's a lion's den, and it's not a Marriott ballroom where everything works. And I wanted to make the transition to working in industry and business. I knew how to speak, but I didn't have a message for them at all. And I stumbled onto the Harley Davidson 100th year anniversary in Milwaukee. And I'm going north to Neenah, Wisconsin, driving that, a rented beige Ford. And I would, just because I'm curious, that's one of your key points, Shark, right? Be curious about life, be curious about, I just stopped by a venue and was walking through, seeing all these people. And I kept hearing, you'd see somebody, this Game of Thrones, big beard, tattooed, tough looking hombre stand next to their Harley. And somebody walked by and go, "Oh, nice bike." And all of a sudden a conversation followed. There'd be a look, a smile, a gleam, and there's a connection being made. And I kept hearing it over and over and over again as I walked around. The next day I'm talking to a group of teachers. And I'm helping them kick off the school year. So it's all the first day of school. I said, when the kids come back to school on Monday, on their very first day, when you stand by the door, welcome them in, instead of just saying good morning, good morning, good morning, if you say, "Hey, Shark, it's so good to have you in my class this year. That's Nice Bike." And the audience nodded and smiled. There's this acknowledgement of, anytime you throw something, it was just an ad lib of, "Hey, I was just in Milwaukee, what's happening with all the Harleys." You throw an ad lib in there, and when the audience lights up a bit, when you see people jot something down, you see people nod or turn to each other, you've got something there. So an ad lib turns into a short story turns into a piece turns into a major section, turns into a brand of what you have. So it's a matter of taking this little kernel and just feeding it, because the audience takes you there. They're letting you know, hey, there's something there. I remember another piece I'm working on. In fact, in my 2015 speech at Influence, I was talking about over delivery And my wife, Susie, who is my coach, my co-writer, love of my life, I said, I need something better than just over deliver. And she said, 13th donut. I said, what do you mean? Baker's dozen. How many donuts in a baker's dozen, Mark? I said 13. That's it. The 13th donut. What's your 13th donut? What are you giving that other people are not? I have that website, by the way. I own that one. But so it's and the very first time I used that, people wrote it down. So when you throw material out there, when you are playful with your audience, when you want to try, you should constantly trying something new, an ad lib here and there. And when the audience, when you're really focused on them instead of yourself, what's coming up next, the material shows itself. And then you just work on it until it turns into something special.
Did you know at the time that this was going to, I mean, was there an aha moment when, and you said this, how the ad lib, the compliment, if you will, turned into a short story, turned into a keynote, turned into a brand. But at what point did you know I've landed on something big?
When I was walking through the hallway at the end of the presentation, someone looked over at me and went, "Hey, nice bike." And people sent me emails, "Hey, nice bike." And when people started to refer me to their friends or other businesses, Mark Scharenbroich, you cannot find, and you can't remember. You can't even remember Mark. People don't remember. They don't remember our names. They'll remember the shark guy,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But they won't find Kenneth. They don't remember Mark Scharenbroich. But I heard this really good speaker. What's his name? The nice bike guy. Just just Google nice bike guy. Boom. So I didn't realize until my audience members told me. Uh, the other thing, Shark, is that when people come up to you at the end of a presentation and are kind enough to come up to you, and just saying, and they say nice things, instead of just saying thank you, thank you, thank you, that's very nice. You thank you. Oh, I appreciate that. Ask them questions. What hit home? What resonated? What made sense to you? You're the best speaker I've ever heard. Yeah, well, you've only heard probably a couple, but what made me different? Instead of just saying, oh, thanks, and taking it to your head, really, why is that? What made me different than other people you've heard? Use your audience members that come up to you at the end to give you a compliment or a question to find out what is really hitting home and resonating, because it might be something different than what you think.
Yeah, it's a focus group of 500 to 1,000 people. So how have you gone
I,
about?
I get five, not 500, but good for you.
Yeah. Well, how have you gone about developing, changing, tweaking that nice bike story over time? You were talking about feeding it, but I'm sure it's evolved a little bit.
It's evolved greatly. Um, I can't remember which comedian. Oh, God, Mark, I was going to write that down too. But I'm a huge fan of vaudeville, huge fan of comedy from the beginning, a huge fan of the Marx Brothers,
Sure.
Groucho Marx, Chico Mother, Harpo Marx. The Marx Brothers would write a show. They would, and this is back in the vaudeville days where the beautiful old theaters have all been restored. Matter of fact, the Orpheum in Minneapolis, the very first show they opened up with, were the Marx Brothers, who have their names on a brick that they wrote on the first opening night way back when. They'd write a show, they'd take it on the road, and they kept working lines and tweaking them, playing with them until they found the perfect laugh. And then they would, that's it, we found it. And from the start of the run to the end of the run, 50 shows later, they found every perfect laugh in the show. Then they'd make their movies, A Night at the Opera, Day in the Races, and the shows were a hoot because they knew where every laugh line was instead of just writing a script and making the movie. So speakers are the same way. The very first time you have to, writing is everything. Performing, there's so many great performers. I just saw Lion King and these kids that do that in Minneapolis at the Orphan with their grandkids, and amazing performers. The greatest speakers out there are also your greatest writers. The people that write original content that resonates with the audience. And so to me, it's all about the writing. And the very first time you do something, you constantly ad lib it, play with it, tweak it, move it around until you find the perfect, nice. I think that's what it's all about.
I completely agree. So, there are going to be a lot of speakers I know who are trying to lean into something like this and look for that signature story, and they struggle with it like we all do. I mean, Lord, think of what I'm trying to do with nobody says nice shark, even though I've got way too many shark tattoos on my body. But why do you think that that story worked so well as opposed to what a lot of us do with other stories that may have a signature story, but this has just been one that's, I mean, like you said, it's become a brand.
I think two things. Number one, uh, a lot of speakers looking for the Moby Dick. They want to find that powerful story that really knocks people's socks off. And they miss the minnows along the way that turn into the Moby Dick through how they work and write that story. For me, I speak from everything from surgeons to plumbers, universal messages. Um, some people pick a lane and they're amazing at lane, and I respect that and I get that. I want to be able to talk to anything from high school students, which I came from that background, to physicians. I want to talk. I want my message to resonate because it's a universal message. People nod their head. They get it. Nice Bike isn't about Harley. It's about how we connect with other people. It's about how we acknowledge them, how we honor them, how we connect with them in a meaningful way.
So I want to move on to another subject. You mentioned this again with the vaudeville and the Marx Brothers, which is a much better choice because I probably would have started talking about Three Stooges and poking people in the eye and hitting them across the head, but that was
Oh,
earlier.
Ricky, the comedian Ricky
Ricky Gervais.
Yeah, boom.
Yeah,
He had a great quote that said, I feel bad for people that see my show the first 5 times because it's so much better the 50th time I've done it.
great point.
Then it's a really good show.
How do you go out working on the craft of developing presentations off the stage? I've heard others make mention of you going to Broadway shows like Jersey Boys and taking pages of notes, as well as in 2023 Influence. You talked about going to see Kinky Boots. You mentioned vaudeville and the
Yeah,
Marx Brothers
yeah.
today, and that. But how do you
I
really
get it.
go about developing that those presentation skills with what you're learning on and off the stage?
We're on a stage where there's lights, there's sound, there's music, there's a microphone. It's a performance art to me. I take the craft, and I say that with all respect. I take the craft seriously, that it is a craft. Um, you swim with sharks, right?
Yes, sir.
What's the difference between being in the water, swimming with sharks underwater, or watching it on TV or in a movie or on a screen?
The difference between
The,
happiness and
the,
depression to me, between 2D and 3D. So
you can watch Lion King on a screen,
yeah,
or you can go to the Orpheum Theater in Minneapolis, where it's playing right now. We took our grandkids there this past weekend. Susie and I took our 3 grands to watch Lion King, and the opening was the greatest opening I've ever seen a Broadway show. Uh, in the show, they had 3 local references to Target, which is based out of Minneapolis. And one was a hamburger reference to I forget the name of it. Anyway, and our granddaughter on the way out, what'd you think of the show? We talked about everything, and she's 10. She said, wasn't it cool how they worked in Minneapolis 3 different times in the show? Which means a reminder that when we're in front of an audience, whether it's in Cleveland or Des Moines or Orlando, you've got to work in the company, you've got to work in where you're at, you've got to work in their industry, you've got to tailoring how much it means to an audience member. It's just, and when you go to a live performance, whether it be a Renaissance festival, whether it be a Broadway show, whether it be an orchestra, whether a street performer, to see it live, face to face, and take it all in, remind you as a performer, as a presenter, of what really makes a difference to an audience. That's number one. That's why I love to take in a wide range of different experiences to once again reinforce in my head what really works and what's meaningful and what makes a difference.
Well, you have developed a lot of characters and voices that you also use in your presentations. And that's something that I don't see nearly enough speakers really do. I've seen a lot of people juggle, I see a lot of people sing, I see people playing a guitar, all fantastic things that all make their presentations unique. But I see very rarely do people come up there and do sort of, characters and voices like you do.
Thank you. I I believe that Once Upon a Time grabs every audience member. The moment you step away from stories and just go into yada yada yada, you can see the lights turn off in an audience. You can hear people pouring water. You can see people looking at the agenda. Um, you can deliver content with stories that people will remember forever. I don't use visual support. I'm one of the handful that doesn't, never have. And it's because I want to recreate the experience through my characters. Uh, None of my characters are famous. I'm not impersonating uh, uh, a famous person. I only do voices of people that no one has ever heard of because it's a perfect imitation of them. Al Capone, but nobody's ever heard him speak, so it works perfectly. The I want to use characters to kind of really recreate the experience and bring my listeners and my audience members in that manner, and it makes it a little more fun for this little vignette.
How do you help people really, I guess, eventually with any of your stories lean into the story? That's something that you were talking about getting people to do more and more. You mentioned earlier, really sort of localizing, if you will, some of that story. But I mean, I've heard you talk on multiple times about leaning into a story.
Well, you'd mentioned the Kinky Boots, and in there, the main character, I wrote it down while I was watching the show uh, on Broadway. When the character said it was talking to the other character, so character one yada yada yada, and character two said, "Excuse me, let me know when you get to the part that's about me." And I wrote that down because that's what our audience members are saying to us as they're listening. Let me know when you get to the part that's about me. It's the difference between like a Mount Everest story. I climbed Mount Everest. It was an incredible view. It was really hard to do, and I felt really great about it. Or I climbed Mount Everest, which was absolutely amazing. And here are the three lessons that I learned that you can use with East Penn Manufacturing, the largest battery manufacturer in the US, privately held company, to help you at East Penn grow because that's your mountain. So it's the difference between, let me tell you my story about me and how absolutely amazing it was and kind of how I am. More so, let me tell you, here's the story, but here's how it relates to you. This is what's in it for you. Audience members have got to lean in the first 2 minutes. Short attention span, shiny keys. What's in it for me? Why should I give the next 27 minutes, 38 minutes, 47, 60 minutes to you? Because time is valuable.
Out of curiosity, why a handheld mic and not a lavalier or a country man? I've seen you perform with that, and I know that's something you generally do on stage. Does that help you with your characters or with movement, or why is that an important thing? I thought that was interesting.
I love stand-up comedians, and Seinfeld still works with a handheld mic. Um, because I do a lot of character in my stories, as you noted, sometimes I get really loud, and so I don't want a sound tech in the back that's heard me for the very first time to be playing with the board the
Point.
whole time. In
Sure.
fact, I tell them, look, I'm going to pull the mic back. Um, if I forget to bring it up, don't turn it up. Just wave at me like hello. Um, but that's why I want to control the sound so I can get really tight or yell and bring it out a bit. I don't want to put pressure on them.
Reminds me too, when you're talking about Seinfeld, who I've seen several times perform, reminds me of the Ricky Gervais, somebody that could take a joke and get it down from what a typical person comedian would do with 100 words, he can get down to 10. And just again shows his brilliance. So a question I want to ask you from a previous guest. This question comes from the legendary Don Hudson,
Hang
who
on a
is,
second. We're going to Hudson, and you brought up Seinfeld, and you talked earlier. Work the craft. Seinfeld
oh,
every day works on material.
mhm,
Every day writes. How many professional speakers every day work on their craft? I mean, that's the answer. How do you want to get better at this business, this profession? Work the craft, get the reps, speak, um, maintain your ego, and know that you got to earn it.
fantastic.
All right, now
So
I'm going to go to the
yeah,
Hudson
well,
question.
so now we're going to go from Seinfeld to Don Hudson. This question comes from the legendary Don Hudson,
The legend Don Hudson,
who is
man.
funny as well.
He's a
Who,
founder. He's a founder of the whole game.
he's a founding father with I told him with along with Washington Jefferson and the rest of them. So he was asked this question years ago by Brian Tracy, and Don said it helped stimulate his own thinking and challenge him. That was a great question, though. This same question comes to you. What did you say to your last audience that you spoke to that was compelling, a value to them, and that they never heard before?
Hmm. Da 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 da. You know, I hope. Here's a dumb answer. It depends. When people are kind enough to come up at the end of the presentation and say, "Thanks for coming in," or like it, I follow up, as I said earlier. What hit home? What made sense? I want to hear about 4 or 5 different answers. Maybe this story really meant of the dad who's with his little girl in the swing, and he's just ignoring her because he's on this looking at his screen instead of engage with his own daughter in the swing set. People come up and go, the part about the girl in the swing. That's typically a young dad that'll come up and say, I need to be more focused on my kids and less on my screen and myself. It's the person who said, for the very first time, I feel appreciated. The whole nice bike thing. And I need to do that for the people around me more too. For me, the greatest thing that, maybe might have made a difference, I'm hoping to hear 2, 3, 4, 5 different answers so that universal messages, it's not just one thing that hits the audience or makes a change or touches their heart or makes them laugh. It's peppered throughout the presentation, depending upon where people are at in their lives and their careers and emotionally, spiritually. There should be something there that's going to connect with different audience members at different times. That's my hope and what I want to do.
Yeah, you said that was a dumb answer. I want to warn everybody because I'm not even prepared to hear what a smart one would be. That was brilliant. So that was fantastic because it goes back to what you were even talking about with the Mount Everest story. It's getting back to what resonated for them. So, what is a question that you would like to ask a future guest on this show?
What brings you the joy? I've been at this profession for 40 years, and I appreciate the opportunity now more than ever. What brings you the joy that's going to sustain a long run in this profession?
Fantastic. All right, let's do a quick recap on Mark's brilliant advice. Number one, listen to your audience and feed that. Try something new. If we aren't over delivering, we've not done our job. When an audience comes up to you, ask them questions. What made all of this work? Number two, writing is everything. The greatest speakers are the ones that write every day, that write authentic and original content. And number three, performing is everything. Take the craft seriously and tailor how much of that presentation means to the audience who see us live. And one other, number four in this case, is a Mount Everest story is great, but getting them to lean into the mountain goes back to making it their mountain rather than just a mountain story. Mark, any
Boom!
last, you like that?
Nice.
Mark, any last
That's
closing thoughts
good.
before we ride out of
Okay.
here on a bike or a rented Ford Taurus?
Naomi Rhodey, who is my guardian angel, I love her. Jeannie Robertson, who to me was the greatest ever. She's the Muhammad Ali of speakers. Jeannie was constantly writing. And Naomi, from day one until current day, the privilege of the platform or something like that. It's an honor to be on that stage, given that opportunity, and to love your audience. There's no next audience. It's the one that's in front of you that makes the biggest difference in the world.
Amen. Fantastic. Friends, make sure to join us at speakernomics.com and let your voice be heard. Thank you to Leadership Books for sponsoring this episode. I am Kenneth Kinney, your host of the National Speakers Association's podcast, Speakernomics, and this has been another remarkable episode of the show. To everyone listening, thank you for the privilege of your time. And remember, Speakernomics is the podcast where you'll learn to speak, get paid, repeat.
Remarkable? Are you sure it's not just above average?